This is Alan Jones on Trial, a new podcast by Guardian Australia, and I'm Nour Haydar, coming to you from Gadigal land. The first alleged victim in the criminal case against Alan Jones has finished giving his evidence after 6 long days on the stand. Jones is facing trial after pleading not guilty to 20 charges of indecent assault and 2 of sexual touching against 6 complainants. Joining me each week is media correspondent Amanda Meade to break down the evidence and the arguments presented in court. Today, as week 2 comes to an end, we'll look at the previously suppressed evidence and what Jay's ex-girlfriend and brother told the court, and how a sudden adjournment highlighted the challenges of prosecuting historical charges. Amanda, for almost 2 weeks now, you've been in court madly typing, transcribing, filing each and every day. How would you summarise the evidence from this past week?
I think this week has been a little slower than last week, which was just frenetic, chaotic, and they kept, changing the rules about reporting. And this week we've sort of settled down into more of a routine. However, it was still really dramatic as things, the evidence was dramatic and the legal challenges were dramatic. It's a thrill ride.
There had been a non-publication order essentially suppressing 2 days' worth of evidence the last time you and I recorded. Judge Glenn Walsh had placed that order on some of the defence's line of questioning for one of Jones's alleged victims, known as Jay. He was a young athlete at the time of the alleged offending, now in his 40s. Why was that non-publication order in place, and where was that evidence going?
So Gabrielle Bashir was just starting to pick at Jay's credibility by exploring his past, his career, what jobs he's had, even his driving record. And as she started questioning him about his job, he was in the police force, and why he resigned, the prosecution objected and said that this is going too far into his credibility and, she wants a non-publication order. The judge said that the journalist can stay in the room, keep recording what they were saying, but not to report until it was all over.
Okay, so the defence barrister then went on to tell the court that Jay was financially motivated to make these allegations against Jones, which he then flatly rejected. Can you take us through that line of questioning?
So she tried to establish a case that Jay didn't report the alleged abuse for more than 2 decades, but then when he suddenly found himself without a job after he was forced to resign from the police force because he was pleaded guilty to assault, she said that he suddenly found himself without a job, without an income, that he had to pay child support, that he had to pay rent. And so when he saw on television that Jones had been arrested, he saw an opportunity, and she talked about, this is a life-changing opportunity for you, wasn't it? And he denied that over and over again. In fact, he's even pleaded with the judge to be given a piece of paper that he can sign to say, I'm not going to lodge a civil claim against Mr. Jones. That's not what I want to do. I want justice. And she kept alleging that that's what he had done. And she also raised that he possibly had a gambling problem. They got access to all his banking records and went through saying, look, you withdrew several $100s at this location at this time. Do you have a gambling problem? So it started to get, really ugly, I guess, which is what the defence's job is to pull apart the credibility of the witnesses. But he said, I've been clear on this. I don't want anything from this.
There was also, Amanda, on several occasions, really long back and forth exchanges about specific details of events at Fitzroy Falls, how alleged touching happened and the sequence in which it happened, what was said, where hands were placed, where underwear was placed. And Bashir used inconsistencies or discrepancies in Jay's evidence to suggest that he was fabricating or concocting the allegations.
Yes, this was a very interesting cross, because Bashir raised all the intimate and embarrassing details that Jay had gone through about Jones's genitalia, and she said, you raised all of those points because it was designed to humiliate and smear him. But you just made it all up. You don't know any of that. And you just guessed what a man of his age and of an Anglo-Saxon background would look like.
Amanda, and she also suggested that given Jay's age, he could have pushed Jones away or complained to someone sooner. Could you take me through that bit of evidence?
Yeah, she took him back to that visit to Fitzroy Falls, and she said, if this happened, you could have just pushed him away. You're an athlete. You're strong. You're so much younger than him. Also, there were people there. If you were so scared, why didn't you leave? And that if he was so afraid, he could have called out to them for help. He also could have, if the assault actually did happen, he was strong enough and younger than Jones that he easily could have pushed him away. So she was really, really hammering him on all different fronts. But Jay said that he was frozen in fear when it actually happened, that he was always afraid of disappointing him, and that he just didn't think of talking to anybody else about it at the time.
Okay, so Amanda, cross-examination of complainant Jay wrapped up after a pretty arduous 6 days on the stand, and then we heard from the first of what will be dozens of witnesses who will be subpoenaed to appear in court for this trial. The first witness was the older brother of complainant Jay. We heard a bit about him throughout Jay's own evidence, and that he was present on some occasions with the pair of them. Can you give me a sense of his involvement?
So Jay's older brother, he's the first witness to actually come into the courtroom. We can't obviously say his name. He was actually with Jay on the first occasion that he met him, because he drove him to 2GB Studios, and he describes how they sat around a boardroom table. They discussed Jay's athleticism. They discussed different sports and also horse racing. And both the brother and Jones were big fans of horse racing. And he was also asked to date certain occasions by what sporting events they talked about at the time, so he could date it because he knew that it was the day of the Australian Open and things like that.
And so complainant Jay had already told the court that he didn't disclose to his family, including his brother, what was allegedly happening. What did this witness say about when he first learnt about the alleged indecent assault and touching?
He talked about how his brother said he's got something to tell him and he wants to meet him at a McDonald's near their home. But he'd also explained earlier that he never saw Jones touching or being inappropriate with Jay at all. He'd always been extremely generous with him. He bought his fiancée an engagement ring. He sent him a Villeroy and Bosch dinner set for his wedding. He had, met with Jones on several occasions, and he really did think that he was just supporting his brother's career. So when his brother told him at this McDonald's, look, this is the hardest thing.
This McDonald's meeting was in late 2024, yes, after Jones was arrested.
That's right. And he said, this is probably the hardest thing I've ever had to tell you, but I'm one of the people that's come forward. I was touched by Alan Jones. And his brother said, "Oh, how bad was it?" And he used some pretty graphic words to describe it, but he basically said he grabbed me on the genitalia. But I can't go into all the details because now it's a police matter.
And so the next witness who gave evidence was Jay's girlfriend at the time. She's also come up a couple of times throughout the trial during Jay's cross-examination. And he said that he would bring her up in conversation with Alan Jones to avoid his advances. Um, but Jay's also told the court that she was the only person he spoke to about the alleged offending. What has she said in her evidence so far?
Yeah, she's the only one with a contemporary um, memory of Jay disclosing to her at the time. She's also really important in terms of the timeline and when she remembers Jay told her. They met at high school when she was 16. She was also an athlete. They dated for about a year and a half, and she told the court that Jay came to her house straight from Fitzroy Falls, and he looked like a ghost, she said, and I could tell that something bad had happened. And he told me, I have to tell you, but Alan Jones has been touching me. She said that she advised him to tell someone about it, to talk to someone about it, but also to maybe report it. And he just aggressively said, "No way, I can't." And that they hadn't spoken about it again until he called her and said, decades later, "I've now reported it to police. They may contact you for a statement."
Okay, Amanda, and her evidence has had some knock-on effect on the case, because on Wednesday morning we were settling in for another packed day of evidence from 3 witnesses, and then the trial was paused as some legal issues were worked out. Those legal issues arose from the evidence given by Jay's ex-girlfriend. Can you explain what happened and where it all landed in the end?
Yeah. So because she said that she thought they broke up sh- around the time of this conversation where he disclosed, and she felt that that was around 2006, that put the timeline out from originally that set of offences was the prosecution said happened between January and December in 2004, but this pushed it out to eventually April 2006. So the prosecution and the defence had to go away and prepare submissions on, is it okay at this stage to change the timeline of 6 of the charges? The judge came back in the end and said, yes, it's fine. It's not materially important, because these are historical offences. It's the fact of them happening and Jones saying, or allegedly happening, and Jones saying they never happened. That's more important than the particular time that it happened, because it's very hard for people to remember exactly when these dates fell.
And I believe prosecutors argued that in this set of charges, time was not of the essence, was the phrase that they used.
That's
and
right.
The
judge agreed.
Okay, Amanda, so looking forward, we are expecting to hear next from Jay's mother and his former sporting coach. Again, both mentioned throughout the first week and a half of this trial at different times. What may we hear from them?
So the mother is an important witness too, because Jay has already told the court that after the Sydney Morning Herald published allegations about Jones, she asked him, were you one of those people that was allegedly touched by Jones? And he's told the court, I lied to my mum. I said, no, I wasn't. But then after he decided to go to police after Jones was arrested, he had to go back to his mum and say, Mum, this has happened to me. The police might contact you for a statement. The third of Jay's witnesses will be his schoolboy coach, who's, again, we can't name because it might identify Jay. He not only drove Jay to training, but he also drove him to the Toaster to meet with Alan Jones. There's one particular occasion which Jay has talked about where he said they were both invited to watch Australian Idol from Jones's apartment, which overlooks the Opera House, and that he was really sad for his coach because when they got there, Jones refused to let the coach go upstairs, and that the coach had got all dressed for the occasion and was really excited about meeting Jones and about watching Australian Idol, but he was made to sit in the car and wait for him. So it will be interesting to see what he has to say about that.
Amanda, after we've heard from those witnesses, we're expecting to hear from the next of the alleged victims, known only by the pseudonym C. What can you tell us about him?
So C is the second of the bigger witnesses in that he has 8 charges. Jay had 9. He's also more contemporary. He alleges that he was indecently assaulted between August and December in 2008. So we know a little bit about the next witness that's coming up because some of the details of his allegations were outlined by the prosecutor in her opening statements. He worked at 2GB. They have text messages between Jones and C in which Jones makes inappropriate comments about his genitalia, including, when can I see it and is it really that big? The 8 charges involve Jones allegedly touching him while he was driving him to and from 2GB Studios and his apartment at Circular Quay, which was one of his duties, and also in the apartment in the Toaster, and an event at a restaurant in Mossman.
Okay, Amanda, just before I let you go, it has taken more than a week to get through Jay's evidence. First, his evidence in chief, the cross-examination, then the re-examination. Is that an indication of how long this trial will go for? And does that suggest to you that it could run through to December?
Definitely. I mean, it takes a really long time for the prosecution to examine and then the defence to cross-examine, and then the day keeps getting derailed by legal argument. For example, on Wednesday, there was only 30 minutes before they adjourned for legal reasons and then came back at 2:00 and only sat until 3:30. So whole days are lost. And, we'd get to the 3rd week and we're not certain that we'll start complainant C.
It is a painstaking process. Amanda, thank you so much for taking us through all of that. I'll see you next week.
Thanks, Nour.
You can read the latest from the courtroom on theguardian.com, and if this episode has raised anything for you, help is available. You can contact the National Family, Domestic and Sexual Violence Counselling Service on 1800-RESPECT. That's 1800-737-732 and Lifeline on 13 11 14. The series producer is Taylor Strano. Sound design and mixing by Jacob Brown. Video production by Lachlan Monstead. Our theme music is by Joe Koning. The executive producers of Alan Jones On Trial are Hannah Parks and Shelley Hepworth. Don't forget to subscribe or follow Alan Jones On Trial wherever you listen to podcasts. I'm Nour Haydar. Catch you next week.